So briefly mentioned Bitcoin, I briefly talked about the blockchain. What is the difference in simple terms? So Bitcoin is a way to digitally transfer ownership without a middleman, and the blockchain is the database, the system underneath that records all of these transactions throughout time. So it's basically like a bookkeeping system, a ledger. It's actually one of the 4 components that makes Bitcoin work, and it's the one that is talked about the most, the one where people are looking for use cases, how they can use this system without actually using the cryptocurrency itself. And it's what all the buzz is about and what all the industries are looking at. But what's really important to remember about the blockchain is that it's just a piece of technology. It's just a special kind of database. And what this means is that if you look at Facebook, for example, a lot of engineers together could recreate the way Facebook works. But what you cannot recreate with a bunch of smart people is the network effect. That's what makes these networks so incredibly powerful. So if you want to build your own blockchain, it's not just about getting to the point where the technology works the way it's supposed to. It's also about getting the adoption, getting people to use this platform over a centralized version that they might have used in the past. So it's really important to remember here that it's much more about the network effect that you can create through the technology than the technology itself. So I'll briefly mention why blockchains exist, how they work, and finally what you should do with them, when you should use them, etc. So why do blockchains exist? And the reason why I talk about blockchains in plural is because you have the open blockchains that people now know under the name of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many others. And then you also have the private, permissioned enterprise blockchains, as they are often called, where you have organizations looking at how this technology can be used. And I think it's important to talk about both of them, because a lot of people look at one or the other and sort of confuse the way they work. To me, they're 2 very different beasts, but they have their own kinds of applications and their own reasons to be used. So permission blockchains really exist to make existing parties more efficient. They want to use a blockchain instead of some kind of centralized database that they have today, so that they can start collaborating together. But to build something like that, they're actually using a technology that was invented to empower individuals, to prevent money printing initially in the case of Bitcoin, to cut out obsolete middlemen that charge high fees, to increase financial innovation, which is rather limited today in many ways, and to build global decentralized services. Now, using a system that was invented for all of this stuff to become more efficient yourself, so using a system that was actually invented to cut out obsolete middlemen to actually become stronger yourself, that's quite a challenge, as you can imagine. So people are very excited about how they can use the blockchain. They have read a lot of use cases, they have heard a lot of promises, but it's not always as simple and straightforward as you might think it is. It doesn't mean there are no applications, of course there are, but it's not as straightforward as they like you to believe sometimes. So that's briefly why blockchains exist. The big question everyone has is, how does this freaking complicated system work? Can you explain it to me in simple terms? So you've all seen these kinds of images where you have a centralized intermediary that sits on top of the database and records all of this data, protects all of this data from hacking, etc. And the idea behind the blockchain is to decentralize this system. So to start collaborating and sharing data without having to trust any individual party that sits on top of the database. Now, even if the party is super trustworthy, they would never ever mess with the data. They can still be hacked, they can still be bribed, they can get into all kinds of troubles. The whole system can go down. So there are many reasons why this kind of system needs an alternative, which is what the blockchain provides. So permission blockchains are all about interoperability, about working together with different parties around a shared set of information. Open blockchains, on the other hand, have the highest purpose of censorship resistance, of allowing any participant in a network to send information and receive information whenever they want to, without anyone being able to get in between that. In the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, this is taken so seriously that there's a startup which has satellites floated around the Earth to allow anyone, even without an internet connection, to receive blocks in the blockchain, to continue building on their copy of the blockchain. There's no government, no company in the world that is able to shut this network down because it's so incredibly decentralized. That is their goal. The goal of the more corporate blockchains is simply to start working together better, and they're not so focused on this privacy empowerment aspect. So all of these transactions that happen, and I've got a short video of some Bitcoin transactions here, all of them get broadcast throughout this network. All of them are shared around the world to let everyone who runs a copy of the blockchain know, hey, we've got some new transactions, they need to be added to the blockchain. The big question is all of this information is out there in the open, how do we record it without anyone being able to hack it, without anyone being able to steal money? In the past, we would use a centralized database for this. So a centralized database on which one company would sit, like Facebook or Google, or you name them, a bank, an insurance company. But this has some problems. As already mentioned, you have a central point of failure. If this company goes down, if the system gets hacked, then everyone suffers. That also means it's very expensive to secure, and I don't think I need to explain to any of you what the costs are of an IT system, of security systems. It's really quite incredible. And you're never fully secure. Even the biggest bank in the world cannot protect their customer data from hacking, because people are, at the end of the day, the weakest link. And ultimately, the consumers have to trust who is in charge, because all of us use Facebook pretty much very frequently. And the thing is, we don't actually know what happens with all of our data on there. There's, of course, a lot of laws being created which force Facebook to share that information with you, but it's really quite a complicated system, and we have to trust whoever is in charge to do the right thing. So a potential solution to this is the way the internet works, and that's also how blockchains work, which is a decentralized network, which means there is no central point of failure. There is no single place you can attack to shut the whole thing down, to take over the whole system. That also shares the security cost, and it means that we all trust a fixed set of rules. Because all of us use the internet every single day, but how many of you actually understand how that system works? Anyone? It's complicated, yeah. But we still trust it. We trust it with our private information, with all of our messaging, with our financial information, without really understanding how it technically works. And that's because we trust that a bunch of experts around the world did the right thing, got reviewed by a lot of other people, and then finally all of those innovations made it out in the open. But before the internet was out there, we never would have thought we would trust a system like this with all of our information.